I think if there's one thing I'll always remember about Red Dead Redemption 2, years from now when I look back on this last generation of games, it's how I came to love a game that I started out absolutely hating. When I initially started playing Red Dead 2, I was so certain that my video would be a 30-minute rant on how unresponsive the controls are, how slow the game's animations are, or how restrictive the missions feel in an open world game. It got to the point where I was talking shit about the game so much, it became a running joke between me and my friends. And yet, I couldn't stop playing. No matter how many times the game confounded me with its nonsensical design choices, its unintuitive control schemes, its weirdly linear mission structure, I stuck with it. I kept playing. But it wasn't until I played through nearly half of it that I understood why. That's the weird thing about Red Dead 2. I don't think I'd ever want to play through the game a second time. Maybe I'll dip into it once in a while just to explore its world and take in the sights again. But while I don't want to revisit the game in its entirety, I can't stop talking about it. For a long time after I'd finished it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It's one of those games that will permanently be etched in my memory because it escaped the confines of software and became something so much more. It felt like it had carved out a place for itself in my mind, both as a piece of fiction and an astonishing feat of human creativity. So that's why I made this video. Before we begin, I just want to mention that while this is a deep dive into the narrative design of the game, I'll be writing a patron-exclusive analysis of Red Dead's game design and mechanics over on my Patreon, so if you want to support my channel, you should totally check that out. With that out of the way, welcome to my narrative design analysis of Red Dead Redemption 2. Major spoilers for the entire game, by the way, so if you haven't played it yet, do that before you come back to this video. If we want to understand the elements of Red Dead Redemption 2's storytelling, it's important to look at what Rockstar was trying to achieve with it. The first Red Dead Redemption was a much more traditional Western story with a stoic male protagonist, a plot that involves hunting down outlaws, and a whole lot of betrayals, bloodshed, and tumbleweed. But at its core, the game told a fairly simple tale of John Marston's quest to save his family. And the 20-hour campaign features constant callbacks to John's life before the events of the game, back when he himself was an outlaw in a gang that many years ago fell apart. Much of the game's plot involves John hunting down old gang members who have remained outlaws. Not to mention, John's entire world, his personality, his family, his past and present, were all shaped by his time as a former gang member. The game we're talking about is a direct prequel to this. Red Dead Redemption 2 tells the story of that gang, their futile attempts to sustain an outmoded way of life in a country that's rapidly modernizing and leaving them behind. Ultimately, they unravel under the obstinate, myopic leadership of Dutch van der Linde. Right away, this oversimplified summary sets up a much broader canvas for the story of this game. Where the first Red Dead followed the journey of one man, Red Dead 2 is the story of an entire nation in a state of flux, as seen through the eyes of one man. It's far grander in scale, not simply in the size of its open world or the massive cast of characters, but the narrative, political and ideological themes that the protagonist Arthur Morgan finds himself unprepared to deal with. With Red Dead 2, Rockstar wanted to do much more than create the next big open world game with fancy graphics. The story and character interactions are woven together in a way that more closely resembles the structure of a sweeping epic than an ordinary linear plot. History is deeply embedded within the game world. Whether it's the main plot, the side quests, or just the open world exploration itself. 19th century America is undergoing an active transformation in its political and economic landscape, and outlaws like the van der Linde gang are simply not welcome anymore. The wide open frontiers that outlaws once could roam freely, where they could loot and pillage at will without fear of the law, are now being taken over by towns, cities, and civilization. The roots of industrialism and modern-day capitalism have begun to take hold in the country. And as the population grows and moves away from the far-flung settlements and into cities, law enforcement becomes more organized to meet the demands of a growing population. And the law does not take kindly to being broken. This right here is the focal point of the game's central drama and the very core of its narrative conflict. Whenever characters cross paths with these shifts in political climate, it results in a clash of ideologies and, more often than not, violence. But this sounds more like a Tolstoy novel than a video game. How does Rockstar take these lofty concepts and scale them down to the player who's controlling just a single character in a linear story? Well, the game doesn't actually reinvent the wheel in any major way. Instead, the writers have used these broad historical notes to escalate the most human elements of conflict between the characters. Let me give you an example. Arthur Morgan's run-ins with the Wapiti tribe of Native Americans are probably my favorite parts in the game because of how organically they manage to both drive the plot forward and flesh out the deeper nature of the characters of Arthur and Dutch. When Arthur becomes embroiled in the affairs of the Wapiti tribe, who are simply trying to protect their lands from the government, he initially helps the chief's son, Eagle Flies, who's fighting against the government's attempts to encroach on their lands. But as he spends more time with the tribe, particularly with Rain's Fall, the chief, he begins to realize how much more complicated their situation is. The tribe cannot hope to fight the government head-on, and they depend on them for medicines and vaccines. Peace treaties are really their only option to survive. Eagle Flies believes his father to be weak and pathetic, and Dutch sees this. He takes this opportunity to strike back at the government and helps Eagle Flies on dangerous missions that only reinforces the government's resolve to wipe out the Wapiti tribe. All of this comes to a head when Dutch realizes that Arthur has been secretly helping Rain's Fall in his peace talks, undermining his efforts to brew more trouble with the government. If Dutch was already losing trust in Arthur, this only further eroded their relationship. Every character in the game has their own individual desires and motivations, and when you add a game of political tug-of-war into the mix, everyone just pulls harder, and the rope gets tighter. This is how conflict is heightened in the story. Watching how they respond to these situations reveals the true nature of each character, their flaws, their innermost fears. Dutch van der Linde never truly became the villain of the story until that moment when he goaded the young, overzealous son of a tribal chief into open battle with the entire United States Army, all the while pretending to be on his side. The stories told in Red Dead 2, while individually compelling, form this complex web of political and moral commentary that's woven into genuine character moments. But it never feels like the story gets heavy-handed or preachy because Red Dead 2 successfully demonstrates what most other game stories fail to get right: narrative subtlety. So much of the game's more poignant and memorable moments come from the smaller, quieter scenes where it almost feels like more is said in the exchanged glances than in the dialogues themselves.
Look at us. Out here risking our necks, and for what exactly? For an idea that don't work no more.
How you mean?
You know just what I mean.
The game trusts you to work out the character's inner thoughts and insecurities for yourself. That extra bit of effort transforms what could otherwise be confined to a few dramatic lines of dialogue to an invisible yet very real connection between you and the characters. That's another thing about this game. It has a lot of characters. And I mean a lot. After all, Arthur is part of a gang and spends a lot of his time working, going on missions, and traveling the country with them. Handling that many characters is a lot of work. The normal way most studios would do it is to have them be part of missions and a few cutscenes in the storyline, and outside of that, give them all some basic animations, a few canned lines, and call it a day. What Rockstar ended up doing is, let's just say, a bit more ambitious. When designing the infamous Vanderlyn gang, Dan Houser, creative lead at Rockstar, and the writing team wanted to go far beyond simply creating a handful of characters for the protagonist to go shoot people with. They had to feel less like NPCs ready to give you fetch quests and more like a large family that your protagonist was living and traveling the country with. And thus, the camp was born. But the primary inspiration for Red Dead 2's camp system came from a pretty unexpected source: GTA 5. When the writers began work on the story, they realized that for the world to feel truly authentic and real, it wasn't enough to simply have all these characters exist. They needed to have lives outside of the player's sphere of influence. This is where they took a page out of GTA 5's storytelling techniques. In that game, you get to play as 3 separate characters, each with their own lives, separate social circles, and different economic backgrounds. You could switch between characters at almost any point, letting you play different missions with each of them. But when you're playing as one character, it's not as though the others are in stasis, inactive while they wait for the player to play as them again. When you switch characters, you often find them in the middle of something they were doing. A conversation with someone, a phone call, or a random activity. Even the characters around them have distinct schedules. For example, Michael has a son who you'll usually find playing video games in his room, while his wife downstairs is taking yoga lessons. From the player's perspective, these are relatively small details, but it goes a long way in making the game world seem real and alive. Now imagine doing that for like 25 characters. That's what the creative heads of Red Dead 2 were convinced had to be done to really sell that feel of an open world that goes on whether you as the player engage with it or not. It's a lot of work writing all these extra lines of dialogue and programming hundreds of little actions, most of which the player may not even see. But going that extra mile meant that I could walk into camp at any point, stroll up to one of the characters and start a conversation without ever having the game break my immersion by giving me a canned, standardized response. The game even features several optional side quests where I can help out a character with some personal problems. That way, I can choose to spend more time with the characters I like. But the camp is far more than a piece of set dressing to make the game look more realistic. It's a central narrative and gameplay element of Red Dead 2. Not only is this where you find most of the Vanderlyn gang going about their daily business, it's where you can talk to individual members, sit down for a game of poker with them, enjoy a night of song, drink, and conversation by the fire. You can interrupt conversations between members to initiate a quest, or have Mrs. Grimshaw accost you and force you to have a bath after you've spent days away from the camp. It's also where you can gather food and resources from the open world and bring them back to camp to feed the gang members. You can donate money to the gang's fund to keep their finances up, or upgrade camp facilities to make your life easier, or just decorate the tents with animal hides and antlers. You're an active, contributing member of this group of itinerant outlaws, and you see the fruits of your labor pay off. It serves as the very core of Arthur's entire world, as well as that of the game itself. And just like the breakdown of a dysfunctional family is often mirrored in the decay of the place they live in, the state of the camp changes over the course of the game. The first 2 campsites are the most beautiful and idyllic, and the gang is in high spirits as they set up their tents and stalls. You have lots of options to customize the camp and lots of space to gather resources. But as the story goes on, and one of Dutch's many reckless escapades results in the gang being forced to move from one location to another, the weariness begins to settle in. The minds of your companions are less occupied with seeking out opportunities and more with survival. As things continue to go wrong, the gang starts to rot from the inside and is picked apart from the outside, as people either leave or are killed. By the end, your final campsite at Beaver Hollow is a tiny, shabby settlement of less than a dozen remaining gang members, and all your decorations and upgrades are gone. These people are desperate now and have no time for such frivolities. It's heartbreaking to see that. Of course, the events in the story are what drive this change. Events set into motion by the actions of the protagonist and deuteragonist, Arthur Morgan and Dutch van der Linde. Almost all video games have this one cardinal rule of gameplay, so to speak. It's called a power curve, where the player character starts off as weak and low powered with fewer tools and mechanics at your disposal. As you play through the game and get better at it, the game slowly feeds you new powers, abilities and weapons, and you can take on increasingly high-level challenges. By the end of the game, you've unlocked most, if not all, the available powers. Think of literally any traditional video game. Metroid, Borderlands, Skyrim. They all have this rising power curve. But Red Dead 2 does none of this. In fact, it breaks the cardinal rule by doing the very opposite. A reversal of the power curve. The game begins at a point where the gang is past the height of their power. Having suffered a major setback at Blackwater, they're only just beginning to recover when they settle at Horseshoe Overlook. From this point on, it's all downhill. As the situation spirals out of control with every short-sighted decision Dutch makes, and they're forced to move from campsite to campsite, you can see the gang fraying at the edges. You see Arthur grow more weary and helpless. In his article about Red Dead on NPR, Jason Sheehan discusses the power curve. Arthur's diagnosis of tuberculosis halfway through the game is a death sentence that will be enacted in the cruelest way, by making Arthur progressively weaker and weaker the longer he manages to hold on. A reversal of the power curve. Even though you know Arthur will somehow muster the strength to see the game through to the end of its narrative course, he will now approach every story mission in worse health, looked on as sickly and incapable by those around him. To live by the gun and die by it has a kind of internal poetry that we instinctively accept. But to live by the gun and die on the side of a mountain, coughing your lungs out as everything goes dark, that's harsh judgment in a way that I've rarely seen before. When it comes right down to it, Red Dead Redemption 2 is, simply put, a tale of the fragile egos of men in power, of obstinate pride and delusions of grandeur. Dutch van der Linde is a narcissistic megalomaniac, and the only reason he's gotten away with it all these years was because of his infectious charm and cult leader-like ability to sway people with his words. According to him, to live freely was to live without consequence, which is anathema to the very idea of establishment and organized society. Ultimately, that whole outlaw way of life Dutch was so infatuated with was a lie. A lie he told himself and the gang to convince them to never rest, never settle for anything less than utopia. In an interview by Twinfinite with Benjamin Byron Davis, the actor who played the role of Dutch, this was one of the questions. Can you close your eyes and imagine what paradise is for Dutch and what that looks like? To which Benjamin replied, I think his dream would be Horseshoe Overlook. I think Dutch was at his best on the run with all of his family behind him, thinking about the future. I don't think that there was any arrival. He was a dreamer. The journey was more important than any arrival. In the midst of all this, Arthur Morgan was having his own personal crisis. But the tuberculosis wasn't just some cheap appeal to the audience for sympathy. That terminal diagnosis afforded, for the first time in his life, an opportunity to reflect on the things he'd done over the years. The people he had driven to destitution, whose lives he had taken, whose families had been left without a father or a husband or a son on his account. And all for what? The false promises? The woefully misguided moral convictions of his leader? In a lot of ways, the character arc of Arthur Morgan was inextricably intertwined with Dutch van der Linde's. You could even say that the reason Arthur's personal outlook changed was because Dutch didn't. Something I really appreciate about how the game handled the final chapters was the way Arthur never presumed to seek forgiveness for his sins. When he realized the gang was a lost cause and that he was going to die very soon, he salvaged what he could. He helped save the people who still had a life to live, since his was coming to an end anyway. But it wasn't because he wanted to feel better about himself. He had to do it because, very simply, it was the right thing to do. Now, of all times, he had to do it. Nothing could erase his crimes from the world. Nothing would undo the tragedy he had begotten on these folk. But this was the next best thing.
I don't want your money.
Yeah, I know you don't want it.
I don't.
You sure as shit need it. Take it.
No.
I ain't looking for forgiveness. It ain't about that. Don't forgive me. Just take the money and get out of here, please. I know I ruined your life. I suffer for it every day. But don't let yourself get killed for pride. I seen it kill too many folk. Don't say anything. Don't thank me. Just take the money and pack your bags. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
I said don't thank me.
The relationship between Arthur Morgan and Dutch van der Linde is a complex and layered one. But it also presents what is perhaps the game's biggest narrative missed opportunity. The emotional crux of Red Dead 2 lies in Dutch's gradual transformation from charismatic gang leader to a duplicitous, cold-blooded killer, and Arthur's disillusionment at watching this unfold. But the problem is that the game starts at a point when the gang is showing the first signs of decline. I keep hearing tales of the fantastic adventures of the van der Linde gang in their heyday, when Dutch was leading them from one successful heist to another. I see Arthur tell fellow gang members that years ago, Dutch was a very different man, who upheld strong morals and helped struggling folks. I keep hearing about it, but I never actually get to see it. All I see is an overconfident old man out of his depth, and that leaves me wondering why these people are so loyal to him. Why has Arthur given up everything to follow this man to the ends of the earth? What has Dutch done to earn this unconditional loyalty? I think the game would have significantly benefited from starting the story in a time when the van der Linde gang was still new, and Arthur was a callow young man learning the ropes of being an outlaw from his mentor and father figure. It would have effectively conveyed the vision of Dutch as a powerful and benevolent leader of a scrappy gang rising to power, which would have made their ultimate downfall that much more impactful. So while, yes, I do logically understand and infer this knowledge from the various conversations and cutscenes in the game, I never get emotionally invested in that version of Dutch. But ultimately, none of this stopped me from being hit with a sense of desolation in the final moments of Arthur's life. As he took his last ride back to camp, ready to confront Dutch and Micah, his life flashing before his eyes, I could feel my heart sinking with his, sinking with the weight of knowing that it was all about to end very soon. Arthur had loved Dutch so very much, would have easily given his life for him, would have never even thought to betray his trust. When he was forced to choose between the woman he loved and the man he worshipped, he chose the latter, giving it all up to stay with the gang. That was his whole world. Dutch was his whole world. But the moment he left him to die at the hands of the army, Arthur was forced to bury the man he'd always believed Dutch to be. That man was long gone, taking with him Arthur's only true anchor to the world. I'd known Arthur would die even before I played the game, but as the sun set on his cold, lifeless body on that lonely mountaintop, there were tears in my eyes. Things could have turned out so differently if everyone was just a little bit more like Arthur Morgan. If I spoke about everything I thought of while playing Red Dead Redemption 2, this video would be 5 hours long and no one would watch it. But that's just the kind of game it is. It's a small universe unto itself, and just like the real world, there's so many things I love and hate about it. By the halfway point in the game, I started to feel like the main story was way too long. It was also pretty repetitive, in that the basic story loop kind of had this structure. The gang sets up camp in a place. Dutch has a plan to make money that initially works, but goes awry after a while. The locals get angry with the gang, there's a big shootout, and they're forced to leave the area and set up camp elsewhere. In fact, this was my biggest annoyance with the Lemoyne segment of the game, where Arthur and the gang get involved in a spat between two rival families, the Greys and the Braithwaites. When I got to this point of the story, I actually got kind of excited. Dutch and the gang were double-crossing both families and helping them sabotage each other's businesses, and the tension was building. I was hoping it would escalate to the point where both families declared war on each other and I'd have to choose which one to side with. The gang would join that family in an all-out battle where we storm their mansion, fight hundreds of enemies, and help them take over the region. It would not only have been a massive set-piece battle and a very interesting decision to make, but it wouldn't even have disrupted the general flow of the rest of the story. It would have introduced new conflict between gang members, and it would have been so satisfying getting to make such an impactful choice. What happened instead was that the families realized what we were doing. There was a shootout with the Greys, and then the gang attacked the Braithwaite Manor and then had to leave the area. That felt like such a cop-out. The thing is, when the combat system is this basic, the game needs to provide interesting narrative justifications for me to keep engaging with it. By doing what the game did, it didn't introduce anything new or interesting to the experience. Just a slightly different version of the same exact encounters that had happened 2 or 3 times already. So yeah, in some ways Red Dead 2 feels like it's a better story-driven experience than a video game that's fun to play for its own sake. It feels like a massive Lego set that keeps forcing you to use an instruction manual. It couples some of the best writing I've ever seen in video games with some of the most clunky, repetitive and boring gameplay I've experienced in a AAA game. It frustrated me and blew me away in equal parts. And by the end, I was left with an acute sense of loss. Like some massive event that had consumed so many hours of my time and mind space had just ended. I will never play Red Dead Redemption 2 all over again because as a video game, it simply isn't fun enough. But the story it tells and the characters, particularly that of leading man Arthur Morgan, are some of the most unforgettable narrative experiences I will ever have. Thanks so much for watching Next Level Narrative. If you like my content, you can help me out by liking and subscribing and even supporting me on Patreon. This is your host, Anish Bhargav, signing out.